Can you get wealthy from just your 9 to 5?
Or is the American dream as we know it dead?
In a world where there's more millionaires than ever before, why does it feel so dang hard to actually build wealth?
Today, we're talking about how your job may or may not be setting you up for wealth creation.
Let's get into it. Before we talk about wealth creation, Kayla, I have a confession. I hate making decks for work.
Say more.
Well, I know I have great ideas, obviously,
Obviously.
but it feels like a waste of time to have to pick the right font, format each slide, select nice colors. It's too much. I end up spending more time designing the deck than I did thinking of the great idea in the first place.
Well, I have some great news.
Morning Brew's banning slide decks?
No, even better. Gamma takes your great ideas and turns them into sleek presentations with just one click. All the things you hate about creating decks, Gamma does for you.
Gamma? I don't remember us hiring this person.
No, Gamma is an AI tool anyone can use to eliminate time spent formatting and increase time spent driving real impact. Whether it's a deck, web page, document, or social post, Gamma turns your great ideas into something shareable in one click.
And where do I find Gamma asking for a friend?
Try it for free today at gamma.app/PMLE. That's GAMMA.app/PMLE.
Okay, now we can get to wealth creation. Kayla, I think today's show we're teaching everyone how to become billionaires. Is that what you thought we were doing?
That's exactly what I thought.
Perfect. No, let's talk about wealth and the intersection of career. And I have a question just for you up top. How has money played a role in career motivation, in the jobs you've selected? Like, do you consider yourself someone to be very money motivated?
I don't know that I'm very money motivated, but I think I'm externally motivated, and
Okay.
money is a really nice way to replace grades in the world. So whether I'm proud of it or not, it's certainly getting raises and increasing the wealth that the salary that I have is very enticing to me.
Yeah, it's like seeing number go up feel good.
Yeah,
And
basically.
I
Like
love.
somebody is telling me that I'm doing a good enough job that I get a raise.
Yeah,
That's great.
It's very interesting to hear that it replaced grades for you. Like I
Yeah.
could see that one-to-one parallel where it feels like putting everything aside, it is one thing you can look at to be like, am I doing a good job? Obviously, there's a lot of problems with that,
Yeah.
but I can see how that could be motivating.
That being said, when I started my career in finance, it was something that I talked about with my parents actually a lot, was how to get out before the numbers become so high that you're locked in. Because
I love how you're like, yeah, the problem really would be I would be making so much
no,
money,
no.
I just couldn't stop. Thankfully, I didn't go down that path.
truly. But they're called golden handcuffs for a reason. And I want to
Yep.
talk about your approach here, but I also think, it's really interesting to see that there are some industries that value money over anything else, especially industries that involve making other people money, right? Like finance,
Yep.
where it's like the amount of money that you get is cuckoo bananas. Like no person should have this much money. And you get it like 3 or 4 years into your career. So it's really hard to then be like, oh, I'm going to go from hundreds of thousands of dollars in guaranteed salary a year to, a writing job that makes 75K.
Right.
Like it's so much harder to make that decision.
Yeah, and I would say people, like, I think we all have this vision where we could be like, okay, I'm going to go in, to your point, I'm going to make a ton of money right away, and then I'm going to get out. One, you do get lifestyle inflation. You now have debts that are only supported by your current level of income. You can't drop it down. You get used to that lifestyle. It's hard to give up. So I could see how you kind of keep going down that path, or you're just, purely money motivated, and so you're going to keep doing that. For me, I would say my overall take is I think it's a privilege to not be super money motivated because
I
it
agree.
means like you have enough now where you're not like, holy shit, I need to make a ton of money or like life is going to get really scary. And that's a privilege I've had forever. Like I just grew up, my parents both worked. We always had enough money. They were able to pay for my college, which is a huge, we'll talk about it, massive advantage from day one of your career to not have student loans. And so I have never felt like I had to take a job because it paid more money than another one. I had the luxury to take a job that I was really excited about. And, of course, I still want to make as much money as possible. I'd be lying if I told you I didn't. But it's never been super motivating to me because I've always had enough, which in one way is like a really, really privileged position to be in. In another, like, I wonder if I would be more driven if I kind of had that, like, I need to make money.
I think it's kind of hard to imagine.
It's hard to imagine.
You're more driven.
No, I mean,
I feel like you're kind of at the top there.
Maybe. Anyway, for me, it's been a privilege to choose jobs based on like how much I want to do them, rather than like I have to go into an industry that's going to pay me the most money. So the broader theme here that I want to talk to you about is, can you actually get wealthy from just a 9 to 5? Most people work a job where they don't own the business. They're not an independent consultant. They are working and essentially trading some amount of time for money. They're salaried. There used to be this idea that you could do that and you'd end up in a really, really good spot. I think that quote unquote American dream has maybe started to break a little bit, or people have a perception it's breaking. But it's not something that I thought about early in my career, was like, am I on the right path to actually build the amount of wealth I want? Do you think it's still possible to get wealthy on just a 9 to 5?
Well, okay, so getting wealthy is a loaded term.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about being financially comfortable, we can argue, is that $1 million? Is that $500,000? Is that $17 million? Everyone's going to have a different number of what they want.
Yeah.
But the reality is that wealth creation, net worth creation, is a mathematical function, right? There's money coming in, there's money going out, and there's what you do with the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And there's elements like how much like inflation is. There's how much yield you're getting. There's what the average return is if you're investing it.
Yep.
And then that over a function of time basically is how you build wealth.
Mm-hmm.
You invest early and then you let it ride for 30 years.
Yeah. And you had mentioned this, but I want to start with some statistics to ground us in like what actually does wealth mean. So Charles Schwab, the financial institution, did a survey in 2025 where they looked at what are people's perceptions of wealth. $2.3 million in net worth, all of your assets combined minus all of your debts. That is what people consider to be wealthy in 2025, $2.3 million. In order to be quote unquote financially comfortable, people said $800,000 in net worth would be financially comfortable. So when you hear wealth, I would, put in $2.3 million of net worth. That is what the average American thinks is wealthy today.
Yeah, and that's a big number. Like it seems very, it's interesting because it's like, how do you get that? Certainly not from making the average salary, which I'm assuming is, between 75 and what I think.
Yeah, so from 2016 to 2022, the median U.S. household net worth rose 61%, increasing from 120K to 193K. That's average net worth, not salary. I think the average U.S. salary is around 60 to 70K. Someone's going to fact check me on that, but it's more or less than you'd think. I don't know. It depends on probably where your anchor point is.
Right, but so let's say like you are making 60K a year. That is, if every single one of those dollars fell into your hand and you did not touch it, you spent $0.
Yeah.
It would take you, 15 years to get financially comfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's not how life is.
There's
right?
taxes, there's rent, there's food.
You got to eat, you got to live.
Girls got to eat.
Yeah. And so it's like the reality is when you're thinking about the money that you save after, all the other obligations, also like fun and travel and joy and like, a sweet treat every so often, like that eats away at your potential to build wealth. And so I think that has always been the reality. It's always been, save early, invest early, and then let it ride, and then that's how you become wealthy. Where I think that is kind of starting to break now is in two ways. First, I check me on this, but salaries are not increasing at the same rate as expenses, cost of living. So we're getting less bang for our buck. Mm-hmm. So it's much harder to save as much money as we used to be able to percentage-wise. And also, all around us, there are these people that are getting rich quick through non-typical means.
Yeah.
So forever, it's always been like maybe since like the 40s or 50s, whatever. But forever for us, it's always been work hard, put in your hours, scrimp and save your money. And you too can own a house in the suburbs with 2.5 kids and a white picket fence
Yeah.
and retire at 55 and, spend the rest of your life on a cruise.
Mm-hmm.
That is no longer true. First, people around you are investing in random ass meme coins and becoming, multimillionaires off of a $600 investment. You're like, what? And like people no longer have to work again because they did a stupid little dance online and made 1 million followers. And it's like, that is not just like the celebrities and a chosen few people. It's like your peers.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing people around you, at least I am,
Mm-hmm.
making money and then like removing themselves from the workforce
Mm-hmm.
and like living in luxury for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Like that kind of messes with you a little bit. Like, am I doing something wrong?
Yeah, it is interesting. Like I'm not. I still feel like for the most people, like looking at like creators or TikTok stars, it is still this like power law game where like it's the top 1%
Right,
that are
sure.
making 99% of the money in that space. But what I think has changed is your visibility into how many different ways there are to make money, and then the most extreme examples rise to the top. You hear about these stories and you're like, am I an idiot for just clocking in at 9 and leaving at 5 and thinking I'm going to get rich like every 2 weeks through a paycheck? It does start to put doubts in your mind of if you've gone down the right path. Now, the issue I think is like to become a millionaire in the ways you've just listed is, I think, harder than just working a 9 to 5. So I don't think this is not a call for everyone to quit their job and go start a TikTok account, but it is true. It feels like there's more ways to make money in, very different types of fields now than ever. And it's more visible now than ever.
Yeah, and you look at these surveys of like, 10-year-olds and it's like they used to want to be like astronauts and now they want to be YouTube stars.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like a completely different way of thinking about how you should be spending your time in your
Mhm.
life and how you should be making money. And so I think even if it's still technically true that over time, if you invest based on the laws of investing and how things have operated in the past, you should be able to retire in 40 years after you start working with some level of comfort.
Yeah.
That's like so much harder to visualize. And I think there's also this like nihilism about what's even going to exist in
Mhm.
40 years that makes it so much harder for younger generations to forego current enjoyment for the future of wealth,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if I have a choice, let's say I have $1,000 in disposable income right now, I could either put it into the S&P 500 or do some sort of investing with it, put it away in a high yield savings account for 40 years and hope that it becomes $10,000 by the time I'm ready to retire. Or I could go to Costa Rica for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
That's actually like a challenging choice.
Yeah.
And so I think it's not just like, the question is like, can you get wealthy off your 9 to 5? Maybe.
Mhm.
But do you want to enjoy your life at 60 and then, I don't know.
I mean, my true belief is, yeah, you can get wealthy through a 9 to 5. It's just you're going to be wealthy at a time in your life where you're going to be older, and what you can do with that money might be limited based on other factors due to age. I do think it's generally unrealistic to want to be, not to want, but to be wealthy when you're young, because most of us, you start with no money
Right.
and you have to build that up. And so, yeah, the typical ways to get wealth take a long time. And so there's maybe an appeal now for these, get rich quick schemes, which do work out for some people, but don't work out for a majority of people. I think it's important because what I think is interesting for me is when I started my career, I was not thinking about this. When I was early in my career, I was not thinking about this. And again, maybe that was a sign of privilege, but I also just didn't know the ways people made money through work. And so maybe we zoom out and talk about kind of the different paths you could go down. There's kind of like 3 I have in my mind.
Sure.
The first is what you consider a typical 9 to 5. You work for a company like Morning Brew and me and you. We get paid a salary, and that salary is not really highly variable. Like you do some sort of work, as long as you don't get fired, they're paying you the same every 2 weeks. We don't have equity in Morning Brew, so if the value of Morning Brew rises, we don't see an uptick. Maybe we could articulate for a higher salary, but you're really trading your time for a set amount of dollars. Then there's like independent consultant or advisor where like maybe you're a specialist at HR and you advise a bunch of different companies and you set your rate and you have more potential to make money because you could theoretically get more clients, but there is still this limit where you have 24 hours in a day, you charge per hour, so you have a max capacity of what your effort could turn into in terms of wealth. The third bucket I would say is equity. And this is something that I had no idea growing up. My mom was a teacher. My dad worked in like finance, but was paid a salary. And so like I didn't know what startups were. I didn't know you could get stock options in companies. That I think is the way that a lot of people that that are like everyday millionaires, quote unquote, Emily's, we just found out that term. That's how they made their money, which is they worked for, let's take Meta, for example. You work for Meta, you're paid a salary, but you're also getting stock options or stock in the company, and that stock can go up 700%, over.
It could go up 700,000%.
There's no limit to how much that can rise. And so if you then are done trading your time for money, now that just grows up when you sleep, theoretically, in the best case. And that's how a lot of people made money. And the reason I brought up Meta, when Meta went public in, I think it was 2012. In 2012, 1,000 millionaires were created. So I know it's not exactly the first 1,000 employees, but like that's a rough proxy. Yeah. Because that went public and now you had shares in the company, 1,000 people became millionaires overnight. And to your point, that maybe is kind of the dream. So that is, I think, an underrated bucket of acquiring wealth. That's kind of a blend of this 9 to 5, but you're also getting stock options in a company that might get acquired, might go public.
And we'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show.
So I just wanted to lay that out there because I was not thinking about those options when I was early in my career. Yeah,
and I think what's interesting about okay, so if we're talking about like you are employed by a company.
Yeah.
The most basic, which is what you mentioned, is trading time for money.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times these startups will use equity, or these companies will use equity as a way to justify underpaying you for your services.
Right.
Because they're giving you 10,000. It's like, okay, let's say you could command $100,000 in salary.
Mm-hmm.
You can either get $100,000 and invest that how you want. Let's say, you have $10,000 of disposable income at the end of the year. You could put that in the S&P. You could invest in something else like a little riskier fart coin.
The one I do want to say, this is not financial advice. We're not financial advisors.
Yeah.
Don't listen to us.
Or you could, spend it on something you want to, whatever. Or I can give you $90,000 of salary and $10,000 of equity. That equity doesn't really exist. You can't sell that like you can sell a share of Meta.
Right.
It's illiquid.
Mm-hmm.
Technically it exists. It's usually an option. So you have an option to buy these shares upon, the sale of the company.
Yeah.
Or like the secondary market, whatever. It can get complicated, but you can't use that how you want.
Mm-hmm.
So you're basically getting less money with the hope that maybe this random, AI for dog walkers company is gonna go public and you're gonna make $100 million. That's probably not gonna happen. It's probably not realistic. And so I think that the equity, it's a risk. And so when we're talking about how do you get wealthy from your 9 to 5, some of it is taking risks outside of the typical I am exchanging dollars for service.
Yep.
That is the relationship between the company and the employee.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe some of that is I'm willing to forego some of those dollars in order to get that equity.
Yeah.
That's a risk. That can pay off, but that can also not.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about equity, it's like you should get as much equity as possible because then there's a huge upside, but there's also downside.
Yes.
Which is you're foregoing current dollars.
Yes. Yeah, I think startups, if you want to get really wealthy, if you want to hit this $2.3 million number we cited, or you want to make $100 million, you're never going to make $100 million working a 9 to 5 where you're just paid a salary unless you're an AI researcher and Mark Zuckerberg is
willing to give you $1 billion.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's just not going to happen. The way you're going to make $100 million is you own a sizable portion of a company that gets acquired or goes public and is worth a lot more than that, and you own half of it. Okay, you can do the math. So I agree. Startups, higher risk, higher reward. You're foregoing some money to get equity. That equity most of the time turns into zero. Some of the time it turns into a ton of money. So your expected value might be around the same you would have if you worked a 9 to 5, but it's just a more variable outcome. So I agree with that. What I have realized, and tell me if you agree or disagree, I think the best strategy for building a really nice lifestyle that I would consider wealthy is joining a late stage startup. This is like, I feel like the big hack I've realized living in New York and meeting people that work at startups before I just didn't know anyone. It is less risky than joining an early stage startup. They typically will still pay you a good salary because they've found product market fit. They've raised a ton of money. Like they have enough cash, and there's a talent war, so they have to pay you a little more, but you're still getting stock. And the percent chance of that becoming something has gone, it's not 100%, but it's definitely not zero. It's
Right.
like 50-50 in some cases. And so I've realized like that's just a really good option. And so if I was giving advice to someone who was like, I don't want to go to an early stage startup, but money is really important to me, like I would point them at least one path is like go join a Series A or Series B startup. Not that it's just that easy, but I've realized that and I had no idea before. So that's a good path, I
Interesting.
think.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily put like Series A or Series. I would actually say even later. Like I would say like this company should be public, but
Yeah.
isn't. Like the first company that came to mind, I could be so wrong, and it did go public, but it's Stripe.
Yes.
So like Stripe is
They're
not
private.
they're private.
Yeah.
They're like stage G.
Yeah, they may never go
They're never going. But when you're that big, there's markets for equity,
Mhm.
and there's secondary. Basically, another company or an investor could say, "We desperately want to be involved. We will buy your equity off of you, even though it's not an acquisition or a sale, or an IPO, which is typically those are called exits. That's how a company would provide selling opportunities to their
Yep.
employees.
Yep.
Now, things can get really dicey with this. But yeah, I think when you're talking about a late stage company, the dream is not taking that 90K salary and the 10K of equity. It's give me 100K and 10K of equity.
Yeah.
And that 10K of equity could become 30K in the
Yeah.
future.
You've taken less of a risk. You won't get rewarded as much as the early stage employees who likely have more equity than you. But if it is a sizable exit, you're still going to get a decent amount of money that I think would put you close to that quote unquote wealthy bracket we talked about earlier. When you were starting your career, were you thinking about this stuff at all? Like, what strategy have you
Yeah.
deployed in your own career about kind of building a nice little nest egg for yourself?
I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this primarily because I was going into the finance industry, as we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
And like I wasn't, we've talked about this in the salary transparency episode, I believe.
Mhm.
I wasn't like making bank, right? My first salary was 65K.
Yeah.
And granted, in 2016, that was like bananas
Yeah.
numbers.
And
Like that was a lot.
again, I think we should situate this too. That's, I think, actually a little more at the time than the average
Right.
median income in the US.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a great salary, but when you compare it to like today's entry level finance,
Yeah.
they're commanding almost double that, 120K. You can now get right out of college,
Mm-hmm.
no work experience, and they will give you $120,000 just to like work at the bank. But that was something that I was really cognizant of was like I could stay in this industry
Mm-hmm.
and command a very high salary over time. And it is that 9 to 5 path to wealth
Mm-hmm.
because it is that one-to-one goods to services. I'm not taking a risk necessarily. I am getting paid, and that money is going up every year substantially.
Yep.
And so that is something that I was thinking about a lot because it was like very top of mind. Also, I was working with people and I look at them and I'm like, are you making $500,000 right now?
Yeah.
Like, you're not that smart. Like, what's going on? Like, I don't know. I always had this idea that salary and how much you make, obviously, I think this is wrong
Yeah.
because I've learned otherwise. Salary and how much you make is indicative of how smart and how good you are at your job. And I
Mhm.
don't think that's true. But it is something that I was thinking about a lot. And it is, for example, when I left finance to go to a startup, I did negotiate my salary up like $3,000 or something. It was a pay cut, but I also got equity. Now, what's funny is that that was a huge win for me because I was like, this is that risk part that
Yep.
can add money. First of all, they've never been acquired. Nothing has happened. And when I left, I let my options expire
Yeah.
because it was like I had to pay $400 And like if they
To
sold
keep
for
the right.
to keep the shares,
Yeah.
like to exercise the options, it's basically you get an option to buy a share. I would have had to pay $400 plus taxes to get like 1,000 shares, and I was figuring it out because I was doing the math.
Yeah.
If the company sold for $1 billion, I would have made like $6,000. And it was like $400 when it really mattered,
Yeah.
you know? And then like for the potential of in 30 years getting $6,000, like I could just put money in the S&P
Yeah.
and then like I would get that
Yeah.
anyways.
But you could have put on LinkedIn exited employee.
Exactly. True.
And so that could have
True.
been a real big flex. Is there an element of this that's also expectations, which going back to your original point of there's more visibility and you see all these people making money in quote unquote non-traditional ways, and it feels like everyone's making money except you. To me, there is a level of this that's like expectation. And the question I would ask myself is like, how much is enough for me? And like, why do I want to get quote unquote wealthy? I think those are the first questions you need to be asking, because there is a difference between having $2.3 million in net worth and, you know, being comfortable and living a life that feels safe and secure and happy. And so before you get golden handcuffs or before you get carried away chasing a number, I think it's really important to be like, why do I want this? What do I actually need to be comfortable before you start going down these paths? Because, you know, there's the famous Charlie Munger quote, and it's been ripped off a million times, which is like, happiness is reality over expectations. Wealth, you know, is a little more mathematical, but I do think the perception of wealth is also reality divided by expectations. And our expectations have definitely gone up recently, and that can kind of skew this understanding. So I just think that's a very good set of questions to ask yourself.
Yeah, I have, this is related, I promise, but I really love this idea, which is, so my little cousin is like 19 years old and we were chatting, he was visiting a few weekends ago, and he was talking about how he doesn't have 20/20 vision. He went to the doctor. He was like, I can't see, like certain, you know, I can't read that sign over
Yeah.
there. And basically the doctor was like, your expectations for your vision are too high. You're expecting to be able to read that sign, and that's not a good expectation. Like, first, he did get a prescription.
That's
like,
so
he did
funny.
need glasses, but he was like, you're being too hard on yourself for your expectations of what you should be seeing. Like, maybe it's okay if some things are a little fuzzy,
Yeah.
you can't read them. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And that cracked me up because, like, as someone with 20/20 vision, I'm like, no, I want to read all the signs. Like, that's a good expectation. But it's true. Like, if you're expecting to have supervision, like really, really high quality vision, and you don't, then you're going to be disappointed. But if you're like, oh, no one can see that fuzzy word,
Yeah.
I have great vision.
Yeah.
Then like maybe you're a little bit happier with yourself.
Right. They're like, even vision, which is crazy to think about now, is a set of expectations
Yeah.
you have. Now, I'm not saying like be happy with whatever
Sure.
happens
Yeah,
to
of
you
course,
and
of
like,
course.
oh, you
That's
you
toxic
can't-
positivity.
Yeah.
It's worse.
But your broader point is
Yeah.
like, oh, like there are things where like what you want is affecting what the perception of what you have.
Yeah.
And in some ways it's an unhealthy effect it is having. So I think that is a great point. The other thing that I think often comes up when we're talking about wealth is that study on how money brings happiness. That got, I don't know if you saw this, it's like often cited in papers that's like money stops buying happiness after you make $70,000 a year. That's actually
Bullshit.
BS. It is like, that is not the interpretation of that study. It's not been like repeated. They've done a lot of studies on this, and what they actually find is that money does affect your happiness. When you're more poor, a dollar affects your happiness much more than when you're
course,
rich,
yeah.
obviously. So the effect starts to dampen as you gain more and more money, but it still is always technically positive. And what people say is like money will help take away the stress and unhappiness from your life. And that does kind of raise your overall happiness levels, but it's not going to buy additional happiness once those stresses
Yeah, you like
go
your
away.
8th jet ski is not going to hit the same as your first.
Exactly.
You know?
So again, as you think about wealth building in your career, I think that is also important. Like money is important. It's a resource that's critical to live a life you want, to provide security, to provide for your family, all that stuff. But at some point, there's probably other things you can do to drive your happiness up that exist outside of making an additional dollar once you get to a certain level. And that's, a lot of people cite faith, family, friends, passion for work. And so at some point, you're better off spending time, if you want to optimize happiness, doing something that isn't just about the money. But it should, at some point, like, when you're early, like, think about building money. I do think that is important.
Yeah, and I think like I can speak personally about this, but also generally like there's a difference between needing to work to live and like getting to choose where you work.
Yeah.
And I think that that changes like once I had saved up enough that if I was unemployed, I could live for 6 months. It's not like a huge savings, but I was like I something was unlocked for me where I felt so much more comfortable taking risks at work, comfortable pushing back at work,
Right.
comfortable expressing myself at work, choosing a job that I was happy with and passionate about. And that's not wealth, right? That's like emergency fund. And yet had a material change in how I showed up,
Exactly.
which made my life drastically better. And so I think when we're talking about wealth building in 9 to 5, it's like I want to work, not I have to work. And that shift is what I would consider like true wealth.
Yeah.
You
I,
know?
I think your point about having enough money where you could push back at work is really underrated.
It's like an FU fund,
it
basically.
it gives you power to be like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna push back, and if you fire me, I could go get another job, but I wouldn't be like destitute the next day. Like I'm still can make rent for a couple months or a year. That is really, really important, and I do think that there is abuses of that in society where people are very, very poor, and you have less power than to your employer to push back because
Exactly.
they know your situation, they know you need the money. So I think that's a really, really great point you bring up. I want to wrap up here, Kayla. Our audience, early to mid career professionals, they're ambitious, they're crushing it. How should they be thinking about wealth? Do you have like a summary of kind of some tactical tips that our audience should walk away with when it comes to thinking about the intersection of career and wealth?
Yeah, I think the reality is that there are so many better experts about the actual tactics of wealth creation than us.
Yes.
So first, go check out Money with Katie. I actually like she has done some really great stuff talking about this. I think she's a very good resource. The Wealth Planner is lovely. I also recommend that. But in terms of like thinking about wealth, I think the FU fund, knowing that you can incur a few months of expenses is the first way to kind of experience that like benefit that comes with building wealth. And I think that is like the biggest unlock. And then from there, you can start thinking about the long term. But until you have that, I would prioritize it. I would also, even though wealth building is something that is the whole kind of goal of working besides like living is to be able to retire and like have a life that you want to have.
Yeah.
It's like rank your important factors of what you want out of your life and then make sure that you're consistently checking in on those because wealth is not everything. If you wanted to maximize the amount of money that you have as early as possible, you're going to be miserable. So thinking through that, again, this is all once you have that stability of the 3 or 6 month FU fund.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, I think your last point about what are you optimizing for? I always start there. Like, I don't think it's bad to optimize for money. I don't think it's bad to optimize for happiness or learning or whatever it might be. But you should know what you are optimizing for. So if you don't understand that, like, what are you really even doing? And it's going to be hard to navigate or make decisions if you don't know what you're trying to optimize for. So my advice is for you, like, figure out that list. And if wealth is on that list or if it's number one, really understand like what you're getting into when you sign up for a standard 9 to 5. As we've talked about, yeah, it is possible to build wealth, but it's a slow compounding game. I'm a normie. I do it. Like, I just put my money in an S&P 500 and someone told me when I'm 65, it'll be more. Fingers crossed. Like,
Yeah.
I don't touch it. And so that isn't really a sexy thing. I'm not going to get rich overnight. But that's my strategy and I feel comfortable with that. And I know what my strategy is. And so if you do want to get wealthy, I wouldn't follow my strategy. That is where you're going to need some of these outcomes that are higher risk. You go work for a startup. So figure that out. And then my last piece of advice, I mentioned it earlier, is like, I do think there is this really interesting sweet spot where you can kind of get the best of both worlds. You can make decent salary, 9 to 5, working for this Series B, Series C startup, later stage startup. You are getting some equity. It's a little de-risked. I think that is a really good path for like quote unquote average knowledge worker to not get ludicrously wealthy, but to get to increase the chance of like a higher nest egg. And I wish I would have known that, quite frankly, earlier in my career when I just didn't even have any understanding. I was working for AmeriCorps making $12K. So clearly like wealth was not my goal at that point. I wish someone would have told me that earlier. We've told you it now. So hopefully that's helpful. I think everyone's a billionaire now. I think we did
I
it.
think that's what we did. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome, audience. So please write into us per my last email at morningbrew.com if you've seen other ideas for wealth creation, how you have thought about wealth and how it's
what
affected
we got
your
wrong,
career.
what we got right, what you're excited
Well,
about.
we got everything right, obviously. But please write in. We really do appreciate hearing from you. Kayla, should we roll the credits? Our producer is Michaela Heck.
Technical director is Eugenia Lo.
Our chief content officer is Devin Emery.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
All right, go build.